Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com joins me this evening. Pivot to Asia. That is a theme that the Obama administration has emphasized now and again when not distracted or overwhelmed by military conflict in Mesopotamia, the murder of Japanese nationals and the Jordanian pilot, or confrontation in the Black Sea Basin, ongoing right now. Last time I checked, they're still talking in Minsk, although it is coming morning, between Mr. Putin and Ms. Merkel, Francois Hollande of France, and Poroshenko of Kiev. They're talking about ending that conflict. You note who's not at the table. No member of the United States. However, the United States is very much going to be in view come this year. Gordon, there's a parade of Asian leaders coming to the White House. Is this a good thing?
I think it's a good thing. Of course, you never know what happens. The real joker in the pack, of course, is Xi Jinping of China coming, and that could always be a debacle, because whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you are always foolish in front of a Chinese leader.
We welcome our favorite Republican. Actually, he's a professional Republican. He's chairman of the Idaho Republican Party, which is about as Republican as you can get. Stephen Yates, CEO also of DC International, served in the Bush administration, served for the vice president, Mr. Cheney. Stephen, a very good evening to you. The parade of leaders, including Abe and Xi Jinping. Let's stop there. Abe and Xi Jinping do not see the world in the same direction. In fact, Gordon has been very careful in reporting these last weeks a celebration of victory over the Japanese coming in Beijing come the late summer, fall, the 70th anniversary, a war that the Communist Party did not participate in. And this is nationalism, naked nationalism. At the same time, there is now much talk of the Japanese Self-Defense Force patrolling the South China Sea. So these two leaders coming to the White House, is this the president stepping into the Teddy Roosevelt role, looking to mend the fences in Asia? Good evening to you, Stephen.
Well, good evening, John and Gordon. I see this as basically a White House in the waning years of a second term looking to drape itself with the regal trappings of state visits. It is wonderful. The White House is a tremendous venue for these kinds of things. The pageantry is outstanding, and it allows a president to be on full display as commander-in-chief in a way that's usually all positive. Of course, the substance of these meetings is always where things can get tricky, and as Gordon has mentioned, occasionally things can come across less than what you had hoped in these toasts and performances that go on in the evening. But this is a way to distract away from unpleasantness elsewhere, and I think to basically put form over substance, in my view, when it comes to our national security.
Steve, I certainly agree with you when it comes to Xi Jinping's visit to the White House, which will probably be in September, largely because Chinese analysts right now are saying that they don't expect very much to be done. All they're trying to do is manage conflicts with the United States, and they don't see any progress on anything. And the big question is, if the Chinese have very low expectations for this visit, then what's the purpose for it?
Well, I think it's one of these things where they put the team together and they're going back in some ways to the beginning of the administration and checking boxes of the accounts that they had been focused on then, and are there things remaining that they had hoped to accomplish. And for this administration, the first thing out of the box was the Copenhagen efforts at climate change, and I think that remains a significant draw to them in the China relationship, and they may imagine that there's progress to be had there, but certainly on other issues there is not. And you're quite right that you have Japan and China going in a very different direction. Japan somewhat shocked by the brutal beheadings of their nationals, regardless of how those men ended up in custody and whether they had been advised to stay away or what have you. I think that the national feelings in Japan are quite shocked by that, and support for Shinzo Abe's more muscular policy has gone up. And so you have nationalism in China and a more hawkish view in Japan on the rise.
I actually think that the meetings with the others, the leaders of South Korea, Indonesia, and Japan, actually do hold out some progress, prospect of progress, largely because there's been a criticism of this administration, which I think is 100% correct, that we don't pay enough attention to our allies. And I think that it's good that we have these conversations with our friends, whether those conversations are in Washington or whether they're in the region. I think it's important that we continue to build these relationships, especially in the face of an increasingly belligerent China. So on those visits, I think that we actually may make some progress, if not at least on substance, at least on the symbolism, which, of course, in Asia is important.
That can be of great value, and of course we should be doing these things with allies. Of course, we have an ally in Israel coming to town is going to have a very, very different experience in the near future. But having these Asian allies come is important. In some ways, when a president goes abroad to Asia, it gets almost no domestic coverage. And so at least if an Asian ally comes to Washington for a state visit, you get a shot at some visibility in the American public's view.
Stephen, I call upon you to comment on news. You mentioned the Japanese nationals murdered by the Islamic State several weeks past. News tonight from the Middle East that is alarming to everyone. And having served in the Bush administration, you and your colleagues will be responding to this in coming days. This is, I'm reading from military.com, so I'm not going to go to any of the partisan sites here. U.S. Embassy Marines in Yemen, Sana'a, the capital, handed over their M9 pistols and M4 carbines before evacuating with diplomatic personnel, the Pentagon said Wednesday. The Marines also left behind several vehicles at the airport in the capital city of Sana'a, departing on a civilian flight. This, according to Army Colonel Stephen Warren for the Pentagon. Warren said the Marines destroyed their machine guns and other crew-served weapons before leaving the embassy for the airport. He also said that it was unclear who now had custody of the weapons and vehicles that were surrendered. Stephen, when I told this to Gordon, he was shocked. Are you shocked?
I am shocked. I am unaware of any precedent for Marines being instructed to hand their weapons over to the hostile forces taking a territory upon their exit. I've just never heard of that, and Marines around the country seem to be lit up quite vividly about this. It looks to me to have been an administration that somewhat late in the Yemen process was desperate to avoid another Benghazi-type situation, so they went in and in a perhaps haphazard way got everybody out. But this idea of having the Marines hand their weapons over is something that I think is a really awful precedent if it turns out to be true.
It's a national disgrace. It is something
we're going to see it on social media.
Right.
And you very well should, because people should be absolutely outraged at the president doing this. You know, if nothing else, they should have evacuated that embassy a month ago, at least 3 weeks ago. And, you know, we heard CNN all over this 2 weeks ago saying, why the hell do we still have people in Yemen?
26 million people, the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. Yemen has been in turmoil for several years. This didn't start immediately, but we need to underline that the Houthis are a surrogate desert savage force that works directly for the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is a surrogate force, just like the Hezbollah of Lebanon, just like many of the surrogate forces fighting for the Alawites in Damascus. The Houthis work for Iran. The Marines had to have been ordered to surrender their weapons to the... Stephen, is there any polite way to say this? We turned the weapons over to the enemy and we walked out with our hands folded.
I see no other way to interpret it. And this also takes place in a context where the Iranian security leadership is laughingly saying the Americans are coming and begging us for an agreement on the nuclear programs. So this is really weakness on every level, but this personalization of that weakness and forcing Marines to turn their weapons over to Iranian-linked rebels is extraordinary.
Stephen Yates, chairman of the Idaho Republican Party. There is fog of diplomacy coming to the White House with Asian leaders, but in Yemen it's fog of war, and we just lost a battle. I'm John Batchelor with Gordon Chang. This is The John Batchelor Show.